Okay, welcome to Year 8 Science Online with Henny van Vieren.
Good morning, Year 9s. We're so excited because tomorrow is the last day of school before the Easter holiday. Yay! Are you guys going away? I imagine not because we're all on lockdown, but at least we can relax a bit and not have to sit in front of our computers all day studying and learning. Of course, if you still want to do that, you are more than welcome. I will never stop you from improving your brain, but there's some great videos on YouTube that you can watch regarding the subject of botany and so forth. Anyways, let's get back to yesterday's lesson on botany. Okay, so yesterday we started with the five kingdoms. We looked at them quickly. We said that they're all interdependent. Then we looked at animalia or animals, and we said the big thing is, are they spineless or do they have a spine? In other words, do they have a backbone or not? Vertebrates versus invertebrates. And then we looked at the vertebrates. We specifically looked at the amphibians, the mammals. Um, we looked at some fake animals. We looked at fish, and we looked at birds, and we also looked at reptiles, and these were all the vertebrates. Then we quickly went on to the invertebrates, and the ones with exoskeletons, and some of them with no skeleton at all. Like jellyfish wouldn't have a skeleton at all, but they usually have symmetry. And I showed you some pictures, and we even looked at things like corals and sponges, and how these things are actually alive. Even though they look like plants, they are animals. And then lastly, we looked at prokaryotes, or the bacteria. You don't have to remember the word prokaryote, you simply have to remember the word bacteria, and how they can live from 100 degrees Celsius all the way to freezing. Um, they are amazing creatures. Okay, so for today, when we look at a plant and an animal, there's five major things that are different. Sorry, not different, that are similar. There's three major things that are different. Okay, so if you look at the five features that occurs in most plant and animal cells, now it would have been great if I could go through the microscope with you and I can show you some animal cells and I can show you some plant cells, and it would have been awesome to do that, but for the moment we're going to just have to do the theory, which sucks a bit, but we'll get there. Okay, so on this side we have the animal cell, and on this side we have the plant cell. Okay, so animal cells and plant cells have this cell membrane. Okay, it is like a bag that contains everything. Now you can see that an animal cell doesn't have a specific shape. The reason for that is that we have a skeleton or some other kind of support, exoskeleton, etc. So the cells themselves do not have to provide you the shape. But when you look at a plant cell, they are much more structured. Um, and the reason for that is because of this thing called a cell wall. Now don't get confused. The one is a wall. You want to build a wall, just like Donald Trump wants to build a wall. A plant cell has a wall, okay? And then the membrane sits within this wall if you're a plant. So you can almost think about as your bicycle, the wheel. So you've got an outer tube that is that rigid rubber, and then the inner tube, which is more floppy. And the wind that keeps that inner tube inflated is this giant vacuole. Now, can you see there's also no giant vacuole in the animal cell? So when you see your plant drooping, when you forgot to, the plant that, I don't know, somewhere in your house, and you forgot to give it water for a few days, it starts to droop, doesn't it? And then you give it some water and then it just stands up again. Now when it's drooping, what's actually happening is this vacuole does not have enough water in it, and because it doesn't have enough water in it, it's not pushing it out, so the cell is literally going a little bit flat, just like your bicycle tire can go a little bit flat. Okay, so then you give it water and it pumps it back up and everything is nice pushed out, and then you have the shape. So even the biggest tree that you see out there stands upright because of the cell wall and the pressure that the cell membrane puts on that wall due to the vacuole. Now, of course, the cell liquid, or the blood of the cell, if you want to call it that, which is not a great word to use, but the liquid part of a cell is called the cytoplasm, and they both have that. So both plants and animals have a cell membrane, and they have cytoplasm. Then, when we look at the animal cell, it's got a nucleus, and what's in your nucleus? The DNA. So the DNA, the nucleus, controls basically the cell, because it contains all the information that the cell needs. Did you know that you contain about 700 megabytes in every one of your cells, and you've got more than 1 trillion cells? So every one of your cells has got the same amount of data on it than an old CD-ROM that we used to use in computers. So imagine 1 trillion CD-ROMs. That's a lot. Okay. And when you look in the plant cell, again, same thing. The DNA is kept in the nucleus. Then we have ribosomes. Okay, ribosomes are little organelles, we call them, almost like organs, but because they're small, we call them organelles. And they are the ones that make proteins. Then also we have mitochondria. And I'm sure you've all seen the meme that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Okay, but it actually really is like a battery recharging station, the mitochondria. So you have a little something called ATP, which you don't have to worry too much about it, but you can think of ATP as the battery, and the mitochondria takes the glucose that was produced by the chloroplasts, and in animals we eat it. It takes the glucose and then recharges your ATP to make energy. Okay, and then it gives off carbon dioxide, CO2, and that's the stuff we breathe out. So from our nutrients the food that we eat, we get glucose, whereas the plant cell, it makes its own glucose in the chloroplast, it goes to the mitochondria, it will then turn that into energy and give off CO2 in both of them. Okay, so the stuff that we have the same: cell membrane, cytoplasm, nucleus, ribosomes, mitochondria. 3 things found only in plant cells. The chloroplast, because if you have chloroplast in your cells, because you're an animal, you will be a green animal, and there's not a lot of green animals out there, and none of them can really photosynthesize, not even the Hulk. Okay? The giant vacuole, which contains all the water that goes in and out and pushes out the cell. And then lastly, the cell wall. You want to build a wall. I know I've made that joke already, but I kind of like it. Okay, so there you go. You need to be able to understand this, to recognize it, to know. If I just give you a picture and you see there's green chloroplasts in there, then you need to know, oh wait, this is a plant cell. Or if you see there's no big vacuole, then you know, oh, this is an animal cell. Okay? If you see there's no cell wall, you need to know this is an animal cell. That might be something that you can see, that you will see in the test. Alrighty. So it's never in animal cells where we have cell walls, chloroplast, big vacuoles. So we've talked about this quite a bit now. So plants and animal cells in the cell wall. So do plants have a cell wall? Yes. Do animal cells have a cell wall? Nope, we only have a cell membrane. Do plants have a cell membrane? Yes. Do animal cells have a cell membrane? Absolutely. Do plants have a nucleus with DNA? Yep. Do animals have a nucleus with DNA? Yep. The reason why it says mostly is because our red blood cells, for instance, do not have a nucleus with DNA. The only function of a red blood cell is to carry, well, let me rephrase, your mature or your older red blood cells don't have a nucleus. They are only there to carry the oxygen. Okay, but for all practical purposes, nucleus with DNA, yes and yes. Okay, we're not going to try and trick you with this mostly. It is yes and yes. Mitochondria. Do plants need to use their own glucose to make energy so that they can grow? Yes. Do animal cells have mitochondria to use the glucose that we get from the sun that came from the plants? The energy from the sun that came from the plants in the form of glucose? Yes. Cytoplasm, the juices inside your cells. They both have that, don't they? Now, do plant cells have a big vacuole? Absolutely. And do animals have a big vacuole? No. Do plants have chloroplasts? Yes, because it makes them green. And do animal cells have chloroplast? No, not even a frog that might be bright green. Okay, because we do not photosynthesize. And that is what happens in your chloroplast. So talking about photosynthesis, here's a little video
a process
that is
all plants go
all
through.
about photosynthesis. Now,
Photosynthesis begins
please,
with raw photosynthesis.
I don't want to take somebody else's credit and get in copyright problems, so open up my presentation on the OneDrive and then you can have a look at that. And I've also put a link on the OLE that you can link to the other video that explains photosynthesis as well. But I will also explain it to you. I've also asked you to go and have a look at the chemotrophs, or the animals and the whole ecosystem that we find under the ocean, where they use sulfur instead of oxygen, and they use the sulfur to actually get their energy out. Now, when you look at these tube worms, I find it amazing to think that they are 5 feet tall. 5 feet. That's taller than most of you guys. Okay? And all of that is because there's microorganisms that live here that are living inside the tube worms as well, that can make energy out of the stuff that is available at these black smokers or hydrothermal vents. And then because of that, all these organisms are there. And every time they dive down, they find new organisms. It's, to me, just mind-blowing that these things exist.
In this toxic water, but yet these creatures were thriving on it.
Yeah.
And then when we dissect it, and you got a number, so many tons,
Look at that.
there's more tons of biomass.
Yeah, so I love that video. If you want to look at more things, just type in hydrothermal vents. There's quite a few really good videos on that. So those are the only organisms we know that do not need sunlight. We used to think that everything needs sunlight, but now we know that some life can exist without that, and can get their energy from other sources except the sun. And that opens up additional possibilities for alien life forms, that they might actually be living, I don't know, under a surface somewhere, not necessarily on Earth. Okay, so photosynthesis, only plants can photosynthesize. Photo means light, synthesis is to make, okay, using light to make energy. Now, not all plants have leaves, okay? A leaf may be viewed as a solar collector, crammed full of photosynthetic cells. I think I said this to you guys before. Imagine you want to have lollies, and all you say is, hey, I'll quickly go sit in the sun and have me some lollies. That is how amazing plants are. They take this carbon dioxide that comes out of our cars and comes out of our mouths when we breathe, and they take that carbon that's in the carbon dioxide and they build a plant from gas. There was this stuff here, right, this, and plants take this, and with energy from the sun they turn it into a plant. That's amazing. Okay, so sorry, but the raw materials of photosynthesis is water and carbon dioxide. that enters the leaf. And the products, in other words, the stuff that is formed, is sugar and oxygen. And that sugar is called glucose, and that is the storage molecule for energy. So the water comes up from the roots all the way up to the leaf, and in the leaf it's used for photosynthesis. Okay. So the water enters the root and is transported up the leaves through specialized plant cells known as xylem. And you are supposed to know that word, okay? Xylem is like the arteries and veins in your body, but the xylem specifically carries water. There's another artery in a plant that's called phloem. Can you hear the F sound? Phloem starts. They actually write it with a PH. Phloem is for food. F and F sounds. Phloem for food, and xylem is for water. The X is close to the end of the alphabet, and so is the W. You know that's V, W, X, Y, Z. So water in xylem. Okay, so now land plants, they need to make sure that they don't dry out, and they have on the bottom of their leaf, they have these little mouths. And actually in Afrikaans we call them little skin mouths. And these little mouths can open and close. If you want to do an experiment, which would be really cool, if you want to, take a plastic bag and tie it tightly around a plant. So in other words, a branch of a tree or something. And in a few days you will see there's water in there. And that water actually came directly out of the plant. And that shows you that the water comes from the root and then exits through the leaves out of these little stomata. And I'll show you a picture. Those are the stomata on the other side, underside of a leaf. And you can see them quite nicely with a normal microscope. You can see the one is open and the other one is closed. And we call these cells around the hole, we call them guard cells, like a security guard. And that is to make sure that when it's too dry, they will close it and not let all the water out, because otherwise the plant will just wilt and die. But when it needs to get carbon dioxide in to be able to go through photosynthesis, it needs to open these little mouths open, stomata, to let the oxygen out and let the carbon dioxide in. Okay. And that water movement and coming out of the leaves, that is called transpiration. Okay, so transpiration is when water is lost through the leaves. Now, have you ever walked in like the bush, the thick bush, or it's very humid inside a forest, very, very humid. It's because all the plants around you are constantly pushing out water into the air. Okay, so yeah, here we have some plant cells. Okay, and you can see their regular structure, and you can see clearly their cell walls. And inside them they have these green thingies. And if they're green, what do we know they are? Yes, they are chloroplasts. Okay, so this is a water plant, and it contains chloroplasts. So we'll call that a day for today. Can I ask you to please complete? Yesterday I asked you to do 119 and 120. For today, please do 121 and 122, and I will also set you a quick little quiz to make sure that you understand Mrs. Gren, because Mrs. C. Gren is really important. You need to know what they stand for and so forth. Alright, hey guys, thank you very much. It's great to work with you guys. Thank you that you are learning and working so hard. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. I will chat to you again tomorrow.